Hello everyone, I'm Mrinalini Vasudevan, Senior Assistant Editor at Marg. In the midst of a year that has been bleak and rife with bad news, we bring you some hope of joy and cause for celebration as we enter our 75th year as an organization and present to you a revamped version of our much-loved magazine. The preparation for this new journey has seen its fair share of struggle and challenges, but much like a thrill-seeking adventurer, we have found possibilities at each bend on this road and hope to have your good faith and company as we move ahead, taking on more risks, but also reveling in the discoveries of unexplored territories. Among our attendees today, we see old faces and new. Many of you already know about Marg and have been long-time readers and loyal subscribers and supporters. However, there are others who are only starting to hear about us. For them, as well as for the rest of us, it will be useful to start by briefly returning to the original idea of Marg, to think of where and how it began, what it has represented over the years, and how it arrived at a critical juncture which provided the impetus for this big change. Marg's tryst with destiny was forged a year before the nation's tryst with independence. As you enter the Marg office on the third floor of the Army and Navy building, Kalaghora, Mumbai, you will be greeted by this delightful photo that shows two of our founding members who were part of the Modern Architectural Research Group, Marg, that came together in Bombay in 1946 to form the organization that we are today. This group consisted of intellectuals from India and abroad who wished to forge a new aesthetic medium that would nurture cultural well-being as the foundations for the socio-political well-being of a nation on the verge of independence and a world recovering from the ravages of a great war. Their ideas culminated in an eponymous magazine that would be rooted and relevant to the country's past, present, and future, but would also reflect an internationalist approach and commitment to the values of modernism. Since then, quarter after quarter, Marg has brought to its readers high-quality research and writing on a range of topics related to art and culture, which has included architecture, painting, sculpture, mixed media and installations, crafts, textiles and fashion, theatre, dance, music, film and photography, and a coverage of institutions and governance related to these fields. The focus has been on not just India, but also its ties with other countries and cultures. In its early decades, Marg aimed at discovering and highlighting the nation's artistic wealth, especially its architectural sites, which were still being excavated, and living and material heritage that was endangered. But there was also attention given to emerging urban experiments in Chandigarh and Navi Mumbai and progressive art movements. In each case, it was important for the nation to present its own version of history and shape its discourses. In the decades of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, Marg was key in giving shape to emerging areas of studies such as Mughal and Rajput art, Himalayan studies, museum studies. In more recent years, the magazine has turned to newer phenomena, disciplines and debates such as biennales, ecology studies, art, and law. Despite the magazine tag that goes on the masthead, Marg has really been more a journal with bulk of its issues of a thematic nature. While it held on to its high standards of content and production, it came to be increasingly seen as a niche academic product with limited circulation. The focus remained restricted to print publication and circulation, even as the world moved on to a large-scale digital consumption. In 2018 and 19, we underwent a major organizational shift. We also felt the need to reshape our core legacy product to prevent it from stagnating and to ensure it kept up with the times. We worked on an elaborate proposal, taking in feedback from 20 experts from various fields of art and culture, and created a dummy that received approval from the Board of Trustees. This dummy then had to be molded into a polished magazine, a mammoth exercise that involved several rounds of ideation, a multi-layered process of commissioning and consultation with our newly instituted Editorial Advisory Board, external data management and marketing professionals, design and branding experts, and web developers. Many of them came on board, offering us their time and expertise freely, intrigued by the challenge that we were meeting head-on. To reclaim Marg as a magazine for our times, we had to expand its quarterly scope to one that not just provided insights on a specific discipline and idea, but could also have regular features which appeal to a broader group of people across age groups. It was important to also change the language and be more inclusive of voices across different regions, genders, classes, castes, religions, and professions, and to tap into interdisciplinary thinking and new emerging fields like art and science and translation studies. Side by side, we felt the need to uplift the visual quality of the magazine by reinstating an organic look and a quality of the handmade and hand-drawn, which is always special for print readers and subscribers. To cater to digital customers, we digitized the archives and have made available the magazines in e-formats. We are now venturing into new spaces with online salons and readings, short videos, films and recordings on social media, and curated content for a weblog. Thus, dreaming and planning for the future, we start afresh, seeking inspiration from the original vision of Marg that was stated by Mulkraj Anand in the inaugural issue of October 1946. We must be strong and believe in our ability to reshape our lives. We must explore every aspect of thought and feeling. We must refine our creative energy in such a way that we achieve a true synthesis between the lasting values of our past heritage and the finest impulses of the new modern civilization which has been growing up and around us. Hi, on this journey ahead, we look forward to continuing support from our original patrons, the Tatas, who played an integral role in the life and times of this magazine and this organization. This is a special friendship forged since the time of Mulkraj Anand and J.R.D. Tata, which goes beyond mere corporate patronage. In it is a shared vision of national welfare, Swadeshi at heart but global in outlook, a championing of early modernism in urban living, culture, and industry, as well as a belief in the arts to harness both. I now call upon the chairman of our board of trustees, Mr. Ishaat Hussain, a finance veteran and cultural enthusiast who's worked with various generations of the Tata leadership and different groups within the organization to share his thoughts on this special equation. Ishaat's also been a key advocate of the new Marg magazine and brand, and we would love to hear his thoughts on this reimagined space.
Thank you, Rinalini. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen from all parts of the world. We really live in interesting times, don't we? First of all, I must acknowledge that there are other trustees of ours who are also with us, but probably not on the screen. I must acknowledge their tireless efforts. And I start by the senior most, which would be Mr. Shyam Benegal, a renowned filmmaker, former member of parliament, very well-known individual, gives a lot of time to us. There is Mr. Cyrus Gazda, there is Mr. Behram Vakil, and there is Mr. Divya Chavda. Very recently, we lost one of our trustees, a very well-known lady in culture. I think that's restricting her. She was a very well-known individual, Mrs. Vatsyan. And I think in our latest magazine, we are acknowledging her contribution. So ladies and gentlemen, it gives me a great pleasure to be speaking to you on this occasion, the commencement of the 75th anniversary of Marg. Since Rizio has chosen to describe me as a corporate veteran and not as a man of art and culture, though Rinalini clarified that just now, I feel I should explain to you how I came to be the chairman of this venerable institution. My association with Marg goes back over 30 years. When I was at Tata Steel, my colleague and mentor was Shahrukh Sabawala, whose wife Roshan was running Marg. It was through this connection that my association with Marg began. When Roshan passed away in 1992, Radhika, her daughter, took over from her, and I continued my association with Marg throughout this period and continue to do so even after Radhika retired in 2018. I took over the chairmanship of Marg about a year ago on the retirement of Mr. F.C. Kohli, a real Tata veteran and a man of many parts. Marg was established in October 1946 by Mulkraj Anand and a group of architects and artists who sought to demonstrate a synergy between art, architecture, and town planning and the lives of people. Homi Bhabha was a part of this eclectic group around Mulk, and it was he who got JRD to support this endeavor both conceptually and financially. Thus, for many years, Marg was a part of Tata Sons. In 1986, it was handed over to the National Center of Performing Arts and became an independent trust around 2010. What is Marg all about? Speaking on the occasion of Mulk's 99th birthday, Radhika Sabawala had said that Mulk featured regional issues and folk art, which garnered a strong readership among disparate communities across the country and, of course, the world. Clearly, Marg was therefore not envisioned to be an elitist magazine, but unfortunately, in many quarters, it is perceived to be so. It will surprise you to know that despite the wide salience and reputation that Marg enjoys, its subscription has hovered around just around 1,000 subscribers over the years. It is in this context, as well as something I will talk about later, that during the last year, Rizio and her capable team have been attempting to reposition the magazine to attract a broader audience, keeping Marg's heritage intact. I can share with you that amongst the trustees, there were debates, very heated debates, and finally we came to the conclusion that we have to move on. It is a very fine balance to maintain change with continuity, and I request your patience and support during this period of transition. The publishing industry generally has been in the throes of a major disruption caused by digitization. I don't think I am exaggerating when I say that it is indeed an existential crisis for the industry, and all of us will have to reinvent ourselves if we wish to survive. Marg has taken some significant steps in this regard, though a long journey still lies ahead. We have managed to digitize our entire archive. During the pandemic, we have brought out 2 issues online. I believe this challenge is a great opportunity as it enables us to enhance our reach manifold. COVID has forced us online for many things, particularly how we consume media content. I'm sure a majority of you will be regulars to the Marg website, reading our magazine and visiting our archives regularly. We need all your support. Before I end, I would like to launch the new look Marg. Here it is. I hope everybody can see it. Thank you, Rizio, and your team. I know how you people have been battling on. It's really quite amazing how Rizio and her band of mainly women, but a couple of men, have just kept going, and it's not easy. It's a small organization. They have adopted to this new technology dramatically. And mind you, all at a very, very low cost. I'm extremely hopeful. I've put all my backing to this team to go online. I think that is the way forward for us, quite honestly. We have recently used the good offices of a very renowned firm of management consultants, apart from Selby, where I was an advisor, and they are giving us advice absolutely pro bono. And I must share with you that they are extremely excited about what they have seen and what could be the possibilities for Marg going forward. But in all this, we really need full support from our subscribers. I do thank BNP Paribas. They have come to us with very substantial aid. And of course, the Tata Group is with us. And all that I can say is, Rizio and your team, shabash, keep the good work, and on to the December issue now. There's a lot of work to be done. Thank you very much for being patient and giving me a chance to speak to you.
Thank you, Ishaat. Absolutely. Thank you. Without
Thank
your
you.
support.
Thank you, Ishaat. Yeah. Thanks for the memories as well as for the kind words. Like the Tatas, there are several other stakeholders and contributors who really helped us pave the way for this journey ahead. And we thought that today evening would be a good opportunity to bring them all together and to get them to share their experiences of Marg and working with us. Among them, we've got Sundar Sarukkai, philosopher and representing the editorial board of advisors. We've got Diana Ayton-Shenker and Roger Malina from the Leonardo magazine, with whom we hope to build an exciting international partnership. We've got Franciska, Decuypere, and Shankar Ramkrishnan from the BNP Paribas Foundation. And they've supported past issues generously, and we really need to thank them to help, because they've helped us build the new Marg corpus. We also have with us our contributors for this new magazine. There's Rajyashri Goody, artist and ethnographer, who's contributed to our reimagining practice section. Deeptha Achar, who teaches at MS University, Baroda, who's written about art and technology and self-representation in the at the core section. Sanjay Prakash from Shift Studios, who's shared a blueprint for a living city versus the blueprint of a planned city for our In Focus section on architecture. Soumik Nandy Mazumdar, who teaches at the Department of Art History, Kala Bhavan Shantiniketan, who's contributed to the art education section and has taken us back to his institution's history, as well as the writings of some of its early art educators. And we've got Indira Chaudhary, who's helping us re-engage with our archives in a very important way. Besides that, there are consultants who've helped us along the way. Sebi Thomas from Wells Fargo, who's really played an important role in reorganizing our data management systems. There is, of course, Kinnari Thakkar and Kiran Nambiar from First Main, who've converted the digital website into an exciting space. And there's, of course, Sarita Sundar and Georgie Paul from Hanno, without whom this fresh new look and design would not really have been possible. Karthik, Kalyanaraman, and KK Raghava from the collective 64x1, who brought their artistic energies into the cover space of the new magazine. And of course, we've got all our colleagues, the in-house team, who really stood with us through thick and thin. This is going to be an exciting evening of conversations. I asked my colleague Nandini Bhaskaran, research editor, to take over and to take you through all the exciting new things that you can look forward to in the new magazine.
Thank you, Mrinalini. Hello, everyone. I'm Nandini Bhaskaran. I am the research editor at Marg. Thank you for being with us as Marg embarks on this new path of inquiry through various conversations on the ground, online, and in the magazine. Thank you to all our contributors who wrote for this magazine and for those who are with us to speak to us today. This magazine is a departure from the past, but not so unrecognizable as you may think. It is truly unique in the sense that it stays true to our founding members' vision, but it also dares to create anew for our own times. At this point, I would like to draw on a sentence from our CEO, Rizio Johannen's article called Vision Revisited, where she has a sentence that summarizes what the new Marg is trying to do. And I quote, "Our greatest challenge today is to surmount the fears engendered by our own communication. And hence, Marg wishes to be an interactive space where artistic sensibility, cultural knowledge, and multiple energies congregate to envision and realize an ecology of courage. So, one of the multiple energies that Rizio is referring to here is the interdisciplinarity of art and science. Now, in a sense, this echoes, it continues what our founder Mulkraj Anand was trying to do at that time in 1946, when Marg was the only journal that was covering the entire gamut of the arts, from architecture to crafts to dance to photography. So, in the same spirit, in the same cosmopolitan spirit, we are trying to do that through art and science. And we have with us here Sundar Sarukkai, who is a teacher of philosophy and who is engaging in a conversation in this issue with Roger Malina, the editor of Leonardo magazine. He's an astrophysicist, just to show you the synergy between disciplines and how this journal is at the center of melding different ways of knowing, whether through science or engineering or biotechnology or the arts. But at this point, I would like to talk to Sundar as a member of the editorial advisory board of Marg, and to ask you, Sundar, what was the thinking behind the change on this magazine that you had thought of?
Thank you, Nandini, and it's a great pleasure to be here to get back in touch with Rizio and our team. I'm not, I mean, I was part of the editorial board meetings, and they were very exciting and contentious, but I'm not speaking on behalf of all of them, but I want to share some kind of, the kind of questions which we grappled with. As Ishaat said, anytime you're dealing with institutions in India and the question of change, it's a great challenge. I mean, just the survival of institutions, the strengthening of institutions, as well as keeping pace with the kinds of changes which happen. And these need, for us to do this, it needs great skill. It needs a large number of people who are well-intentioned, who feel that the importance of the magazine or the institution is of paramount importance. So when we started this discussion, thankfully before COVID lockdown began, we managed to meet, and it was a great pleasure sitting with the board and with Rizio and their wonderful team, and along with my advisory board members, the editorial board members, were all of whom are very well known to all of you, which included Sadanand Menon, Rustam Barucha, Malvika Singh, and Rahul Mehrotra. And all of us not only came from different disciplines and perspectives, we also had different visions, and we were trying to understand this new way of engaging with some of the challenges in the art field. And I think given that all five of us were engaged with kinds of different domains of art practices coming from different experiences, we realized that there were a lot of changes which were necessary. For example, the very idea of art and architecture and many of the practices around it were being radically changed. And we need to see how we would take account of it in reimagining this changing journal. We also recognize that the ways of dissemination had radically altered. And we know this as a as a particular problem, because the ways of dissemination from the digital world to the other kinds of media have actually posed great challenge to print journals. And there are many print journals around the world which have really tried to shift away from print journal into the digital copies and so on. So we needed to be able to find a balance between having a physical presence and having a digital presence, and also recognizing that the kind of people who are going to engage with these journals were also very different. And one of the things I think which unified us as an editorial board, and I think this was a point which we were all very clear about, was that we were also very conscious about the need for more inclusiveness. And this is something which I think resonated with all five of us, and we voiced it in very different ways, which is the inclusiveness, not just of themes. And I think Marg already represented the inclusiveness of themes with beginning with architecture and craft and so on. But we were also raising the question of inclusiveness of themes like Nandini mentioned. Art science is just one example, but also the inclusiveness of peoples and communities. And given the background and experience of all five of us, you could see why this was such an important question for us. So we were constantly trying to find out, how does this magazine reach out to more people, diverse group of people, people who come from very different experiences, who participate in this big project called art, craft, architecture, etc. How do we give that voice to those who are not being voiced yet in our mainstream media, in very important journals like Marg? And in the case of Marg, this becomes extremely important because of the lack of other kinds of art journals around. And we know that this has got a unique voice which will have to stand and speak for a very large community. And how does this inclusiveness come in? How does this egalitarian spirit come into the very act of constructing each one of these issues? And I think what I find very remarkable about already the new issue which we have seen and the other issues which are going to come out are already a very conscious attempts at this inclusiveness, not just about different practices, different people who have been and different kinds of domains have been brought together. And also the final point I would like to make here, which of course comes back to something which we had a great large amount of discussion before the advisory board meeting, which was about the fact that in art writing in India, there is a great lacunae. And I think Marg has been performing a very important task, and it has obviously contributed enormously to our kinds of history of art, historicizing art in different ways. And I think for all of us in the field who are interested in the question of art, we have often been confronted by the fact that we need more conceptual reflection. And conceptual reflection brings the question of art, brings the ways of reflecting on what is unique to art in India. What is it that we have been doing? What is it that people from different practices of art have contributed to our understanding of art, not just as people who are producing artifacts, but people who have produced thought about art and art practices. And I think that to me spoke very deeply from what Rizio was saying when we had this discussion with her. And therefore, the question of these kinds of deeper conceptual and, in my term, philosophical reflections about art, which are always politically sensitive and with a fundamental concern of building a human society. I think that really captured to me a great spirit of what we were speaking and discussing and disagreeing. And I must add here that the board with Ishaat and his colleagues were not just very open, they were very welcoming to our ideas and very open to seeing how they could work with our ideas and with the team to really build a very memorable journal. So I really look forward to the future where this journal is going to go and how it is going to establish bridge in various ways. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sundar, for that. Thank you for your contribution. The new Marg has been more than a year in the making. So I will take a few minutes just to show you what the contents are and how, what was the idea and the concept behind these various segments. Now, the contents page reflects the current crisis in our midst, because it was in the middle of formulating and thinking the new Marg through that the pandemic struck and lockdowns became the norm. So this was a crisis. So therefore, we called it Crisis and Continuity. The first segment of the magazine is called At the Core, and the theme is Crisis and Continuity. And this is where our writers discuss a seminal idea that can impact the arts as well as our larger futures. And Crisis and Continuity became the central idea in the September issue. A subsection within At the Core is Reimagining Practice, offering writers a chance to acquire some detachment to objectively analyze the crisis itself. The second segment of the magazine was In Focus, and it looks at the latest discourses in a particular stream of art or culture. The third is Art Studies, and here the path forks four ways. We have regular sections on art criticism, art education, art history, and art and science, which I already told you about and which Sundar told you about. The fourth section, as we called it, Salon. It is a curated conversation on a topic current in our time. And this time it was, must artists be activists? A question that is debated by four participants trying to answer that question. We have artist Mithu Sen, cultural theorist Ranjit Hoskote and Nancy Adajania, and Glenn Lowry, director of the Museum of Modern Art, New York. And fifth, the segment that closes the issue is the archives section, where we go back to take a contemporary critical perspective on our own archives. So through these slides, I gave you a glimpse of some of the ideas and concepts that are behind the new Marg. Now I would like to go into it in a little more detail by talking to some of our contributors who wrote for this issue. And I introduced reimagining practice to you. And in this section, we invited 11 artists from different disciplines to reflect on how or if the crisis in our midst affected their practice or how it changed them. So I would like to ask Rajyashri Goody, who is with us here today. Rajyashri, you said in your piece that when it comes to issues of caste, the artist has to first become an educator before being an artist. So I would like you to elaborate on that.
Sure. Thank you, Nandini. I guess what I meant is that for me, while making art, I'm really interested in going into the intricacies of my life and my history and my community's history. And I think that's the same with all my peers who come from Dalit backgrounds. But what often happens is our viewers often don't want to confront caste too easily. They don't want to, they either just say, this doesn't exist, or, we almost have to start from the basics often when we really want to go into, more complex ideas of, what perhaps is the relationship with water and caste or food and caste and various nuances. But then when the audience starts with, oh, but caste is not practiced or here anymore, or caste is just class, or then it just takes a toll, because I think then we are not able to move forward in really exploring what more this topic holds. And I think it's because people are uncomfortable to confront their own caste privileges.
Yeah.
Because so many artists make work in India and everybody's affected by caste, but you'll never see somebody saying, "Oh, this is a Brahmin artist making work on, abstraction or something like that." So I guess that's what I meant, that we often have to first become like educators or teachers, and I'm not necessarily so comfortable with the role anymore.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you. Um, I I think there are resonances of what you say in also academic Deeptha Achar, who has also written in this section of at the core. And she is a professor of English at the department at MS University, Baroda. And she has written an essay on self-portraiture in the midst of the pandemic. So, Deeptha, I would like to ask you how you arrived at this comparison of the self and how we represent ourselves in a Zoom scenario, and the approach to self-portraiture in the 18th century.
Thanks a lot, Nandini. And it's been quite an interesting experience writing for Marg. I was asked by Rizio to reflect on the idea of art in the time of contagion. And what I thought about was, what is the nature of visuality which surrounds us most profoundly in a time when we're all kind of locked up and locked down. And it was clearly the screen that we were looking at day in and day out. And we were forced to confront the screen. And when we looked at the screen, there was a certain relentlessness of images, and these images. And have we all noticed that if we ever pop up on a screen, our eyes are just drawn to our own selves in a very profound way? We would love to look at ourselves. How do we look? How do we look to the world? And that is something. And we pass a car and we see ourselves reflected on that, and our eyes are drawn to that. So every mirror we would like to see ourselves. So this time of COVID, we were forced to do that more than in the case normally. So I started thinking about, what is it about looking at images of the self? And I started thinking about the question of self-portraits. Now there are, across European art, there are multiple self-portraits of artists, but relatively fewer of women artists. So I picked up a rather rare image, I think, of Angelica Kaufman's image of her choosing between the arts of music and painting. And this is the late 18th century self-portrait. And she was also one of the two women founders of the Royal Academy of Arts in England. So she's clearly a very accomplished woman. But we hardly know about her. And here is this woman representing herself so confidently and strongly, and yet invisible. And so I was just looking at the possible relationship between this kind of self-portraiture and the kind of self-portraiture that we are able to access through technology. So we don't have her skill, maybe oil on canvas, but we can take selfies. So there's this new democratization of self-portraiture which has come into play with the camera, which we can hold in our hand, right? And this new kind of self-portraiture, which is the selfie, is something that we are confronted with everywhere. And this, the notion of the selfie also makes us think about how we want to present ourselves to the world.
Yeah.
And this too has a relationship with now the ubiquitous Zoom meeting, which we are all in now. How do we want to present ourselves to the world? You know, how do we want to present the world in which we live in to the world?
Yeah.
So these are some of the questions that I was thinking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as a kind of corollary to that,
Yes.
the kind of households that we would like to present,
Okay.
they
Yes.
belong to a particular
Class.
identitarian structure.
That's right.
We belong to particular classes, particular castes, and those who do not, how comfortable are they in positioning themselves within
Yeah.
these kind of structures?
That's right.
So the self is always already marked with with questions of identity. And so when we pop up on screen, you know, with the world in which we live in
Yes.
all around us,
That's right.
we are perforce made to engage questions
Yeah.
of identity as well.
Thank you so much for your answer. Thank you. The next section in the magazine is In Focus, and this issue is devoted to architecture. Mulkraj Anand, our founder, considered architecture to be the mother of all arts. And he, along with a group of visionaries, founded the Modern Architectural Research Group in 1946, which was at the cusp of India's independence. And nation building was literally an important architectural enterprise for that group. But also, as important was planning and dreaming for the future. So, in line with his thinking, in this issue, we have Romi Khosla dreaming about a Delhi that he would like to see in the 21st century. Alongside, we have an article, a conversation actually, that unfolds the intricacies of Garo architecture. It is by Caroline R. Marak. She has taught at the Northeastern Hill University, Shillong. And she is in conversation with Sembatush A. Sangma, who is an expert in Garo architecture, and Kolnath B. Marak, who's a researcher in Garo architecture. And along with this, we have other important voices in that section on architecture. We have Namita Dharia, who's assistant professor of political economy at the Rhode Island School of Design, who has engages in a dialogue with Dr. Mary N. Woods, who's professor emerita at Cornell University, professor emerita of architectural and urban history at Cornell University. And further filling out this section, the In Focus section, is Sanjay Prakash. Sanjay Prakash has done a lot. He's an architect who has done a lot of work in future scenarios and devising ecological planning methods. And he has written for us on how he sees cities as living organisms. Sanjay, thank you so much for being with us. I wanted to ask you two questions actually. One is that as a practitioner of architecture, what was it like for you to interact with an academic journal? And secondly, you see cities as living organisms. And so you feel now that an architect's blueprint is somewhat inadequate in designing cities. So what is the change in thinking that you are seeing now, and what would you like to see now?
Thank you, Nandini. I hope I can be heard. Yeah, I can be. So thank you for having me over and uh, having these two questions, which are kind of daunting, and yet I must say I'm honored and humbled by both you and Rizio, because as a practitioner, I almost consider myself on the fringe of craftsmen, like carpenters, masons, and so on. We are a little bit glorified versions of those. And therefore, even though I was dimly aware of Marg as a magazine, as an academic magazine all through the 80s and 90s when I was practicing, I did not consider my world and Marg's world as intersecting. So therefore, I'm humbled and honored that Rizio drew me out of that shell, and then you edited my piece very sensitively, I must say, to be able to both critique and improve the writing. And the result is now there for the readers to see. But importantly, I think this interdisciplinarity that is important in a practitioner's life, of course, because it's their bread and butter, is sufficiently important that I know that now I'm going to be a subscriber when I wasn't earlier. So I don't know if that's a plug or whatever. But now the other point about how we should start looking at cities and our physical structures, I think the point I try to make in my article is something that I've held for a long time, is that we should not look at aesthetic reality as if that was the reality of built structures and especially of cities. But it is the functional nature of cities, the interrelationships, the way that various factors interact and therefore make the city a magnet for employment, for economic prosperity, and so on, that we should look at. And therefore, just like you might have, let us say, you would not be able to create a human being by simply describing the eyes and ears and nose, right? So you would, however, biology is able to create human beings, infinite variations of human beings, in fact, using just 4 bases. So it's our duty as practitioners to try and discover the minimum number of elements that can create this diversity by which living cities therefore can emerge. So that's really my thoughts.
Thank you so
which are
much.
there in the
Thank
article.
you for explaining that so clearly. Yeah, a change in thinking, which Sanjay has advocated, that is a change that our very senior political cartoonist E.P. Unny is also advocating in a way. He's asking us to slow down when looking at the sketches of buildings in Indian cities that he has done for Marg. So he's here with us. So thank you very much for being with us at this launch event. I wanted to ask you, what is the, what are the, what motivates you to sketch buildings? And what is it that a sketch can give the viewer that maybe a photograph cannot?
Thank you, Nandini. I hope I'm being heard. Thank you, Nandini. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. You are.
Yes.
See, what motivates me to sketch. There are cartoonists who sketch, there are cartoonists who don't sketch. I mean, sketching is not an essential part of cartooning. I've been a newspaper cartoonist for many years. Some of the cartoonists sketch. Lakshman sketched, Abu
Yes. Yes.
Mario sketched extensively.
Yes.
I had to get out and sketch sometime after my first 10 or 15 years of cartooning. Got sent out to do what is now called graphic reportage, graphic reporting, you know,
Yes.
covering events, political campaigns and elections through live sketches, freehand sketches, and writing short notes, what are called color copies in our parlance. Not very serious copies on what's happening, but to just capture the color and the mood of the campaign.
Yes.
So my sketching is part of that. So in the bargain, wherever you go, wherever you travel, when you see any political activity, you will invariably find it happening around a building. And as nation building has been all about architecture. So when you go into the remotest village, you will find a political gathering around a little temple or a little post office or a primary school or the ration shop. So where there is some community gathering usually takes place. That's where you'll find the politicians going and addressing the public. So these are markers.
Yeah.
If you look at what one has been doing over the years, you'll find several man-made structures, architectural structures, mark of politics across the country. Also, there are also, you will go and when you go to a village, you go near the Pradhan's house, and you'll find some village houses, huts, hutment, hamlet. All of that have very distinct architectural identities. And Abu used to say that any hut in any part of India, you can't standardize. You can't, for a cartoonist, it's the most frustrating place, India, because you can't standardize anything here. People don't build their houses the same way. People don't build even the smallest huts are not built the same way. A hut built in Orissa will look very different from something built in a similar thatched structure built in Assam. So when you sketch, you get a very, very clear identity into the frame, into what you're doing.
Yes.
One of the reasons why newspapers send out people to do this visual recording, this graphic reportage.
Graphic report.
Motivation for sketching. Also, when you sketch, you give the place a little more time. You come photograph. Photograph, many people ask you, why do you want to stand in the sun and sketch a building, take 10 minutes, half an hour, 40 minutes to do a sketch. Take a quick snap with the camera and move on. Because journalism is considered to be a very hurried profession. You know? Everybody's in a hurry in journalism. But when you sketch, you look at a building for 30 minutes, 40 minutes.
Yes.
When you're actually recording a lot of movement that takes, it's like a video recording.
Yes, quite right.
Many moving things into a single frame. And then you suddenly find something that you thought was part of a structure, like a bird on the roof, suddenly fluttering.
Right. So it shows the
light changes, the mood changes.
Yes.
You find a schoolboy suddenly looking at you for some time and then moving on.
Very sweet.
Dog will give you a certain look, the boat will give you another look. I mean, all kinds of things happen in the frame, and you just stand sketching.
Yes.
I think it's also an acknowledgement of the fact that somebody has taken the trouble, as Sanjay was saying, masons and carpenters and architects.
Yes.
All of them, the pains they must have taken to build it.
Correct.
Also sometimes to demolish it. One of the structures that I sketched for you is no longer there, the Babri Masjid.
The Babri Masjid.
Every activity is political, building it, maintaining it, distorting it, restoring it. All of that gives different kinds of meanings.
Thank you so much for your answer. So now from buildings that show us the passage of time, we now go down the art studies part. In art criticism, we have in the magazine Arindam Sen, who's a Brussels-based film curator and critic, who writes on the films on India of Velu Vishwanathan, who's actually a painter, but he made this pentalogy of 5 films, which are important in the ethnographic tradition of filmmaking. In art history, we have Professor Purnima Shah, who's director of the Duke University Dance Program. And she has an essay on the important institutions of dance for the promotion of dance that came up in newly independent India. And then in art education, we have with us Professor Soumik Nandy Mazumdar, who teaches art history at Shantiniketan. Professor Mazumdar, thank you for being with us. I wanted to ask you why you chose to write for Marg on the early art teachers of Shantiniketan, Professor Nandalal Bose and Devi Prasad, his protege.
Yeah, thanks Nandini. And I take this opportunity also to thank Rizio and the entire Marg team for providing me this wonderful opportunity to be a part of this momentous phase of Marg. And there cannot be a better coincidence also to write on somebody like Nandalal, whom we know that he was almost like handpicked by Rabindranath Tagore way back in 1919. That was the year when Kalabhavan was established. So yeah, 100 years that separates us. And Nandalal joined Kalabhavan as the principal once and for all, permanently in 1922. Yes. So it's almost a whole century that separates us from Nandalal. But interestingly, now that when I was rereading Nandalal, looking at the memoirs, looking at all the reminiscences written by his students, why I say this cannot be a better coincidence. Also, I mean, you almost find that he was also concerned with exactly almost the same kind of concerns, same kind of issues that we were talking about. In fact, just a little while back when I was listening to Sundar Sarukkai, I was also getting tempted to kind of quote him ad verbatim in my speech, because he was talking about inclusiveness. He was talking about particularly how the whole idea to get art, craft, and all kinds of visual activities within one, fold. In fact, when you look at how Nandalal was reimagining the curriculum, and to remember that primarily he was not an art writer, but he was a very hands-on person. Fortunately, he has left 2 major books, speaking of art, Shilpakatha and Practice of Art, Shilpacharcha. Now, both of them have been published together under the title Drishti or Srishti, Vision and Creation, and wonderfully translated, partly also by one of the greatest artists and one of the greatest students of Nandalal, K.G. Subramanian. Now, you see, repeatedly he's talking about a scenario, imagining rather a scenario where artist is not expected to confine himself or herself within a studio practice anymore. He's talking about public art. He is talking about participation in the community. He's talking about a larger scenario of visual culture. And that was pretty kind of, when you come to think of it, I mean, imagining and thinking about art practice in these terms 100 years back, when the dominant visual culture was either the Bengal Nationalist School or the Revivalist School or the colonial art practice. This is something amazing. Of course, he was driven by Tagore's ideas, who was also kind of way ahead of Nandalal to a certain extent. But he needed somebody like Nandalal, a very practical, hands-on person, to actually try it out in real life, in daily life, in Shantiniketan. So that is one very important point. Another point that I would like to say, talking about one of the dominant art discourses of that time, that is the nationalist school, the Bengal nationalism, or generally speaking, the revivalist tendencies, which kind of was always, there was a trepidation that it might get into kind of insular. Even with regard to Shantiniketan, people do have these kind of misconception that it got into a kind of insularity. But actually, as opposed to that, Nandalal was thinking in terms of a global scenario, an international scenario, and he had, and his students had, no inhibition to draw sources from cultures across time and space, including East Asian traditions, as you know, like Chinese and Japanese. And finally, when you look at Nandalal as a great experimenter, who was experimenting not only with his art, but with art education, he never settled for a final solution. Every moment there was something else to encounter, to confront, to negotiate.
Yes.
And that is what kept Nandalal going, and that is what also makes him extremely relevant the way we are all set to face this crisis now. So in a nutshell, thank you, Nandy.
A very comprehensive answer. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you.
The last section of the magazine is devoted to the Marg archives to establish the continuum that we are. Because on the one hand, we are looking back at what has been and looking ahead at the future and engaging with artists and writers who will be writing for us. So at this point, I would, this section is curated by Indira Chowdhury, and she is founder director of the Center for Public History, Srishti Manipal Institute of Art, Design and Technology, Bengaluru. And she has asked Prem Chandavarkar to write the first article for this section. Prem is the managing partner of C&T Architects. And Indira, can you say how you look at the past and how you look at Marg's past?
Thank you, Nandini. I have to really also thank Rizio because a lot of the ideas in this section developed in conversation with her. We've been talking about, archives, what does archiving mean? And I have to say my first encounter with Marg archives took place while I was working to setting up the archives of the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. There, I came across letters exchanged between Mulk Raj Anand and Homi Bhabha in 1952.
That's right.
And what is interesting is that they are discussing an issue that Marg was going to publish to commemorate Leonardo da Vinci's quincentenary. So Marg publishes this, and before they publish, Bhabha, who's contributed an article and is also the guest editor, has an argument with Mulk Raj Anand because Anand wants to put a Kalighat painting on the cover of Marg.
Okay.
And Bhabha says, no, Marg is not just about India, Marg is about the world. And we will reproduce a drawing of Leonardo rather than, put a Kalighat painting. You can do that later. And I thought, these discussions really spoke about the kind of thinking that those times aspired to. And, they spoke about what can we take from the past and how can we mold it for our present. And, when we started thinking about the Marg archives, we started asking, how can we look at the Marg archives and understand Marg's past? And we tried to find an answer by reinventing our approach to archiving, the way we engage with the archives. So we decided that, the best way would be perhaps to treat the archives not as the colonizers encouraged us to do, to look at it mechanically as a knowledge retrieval system, but really as a site of active knowledge production. So what we felt could be done here is to invite a practitioner to look at some of the material that's there in the archive and reflect on that for our present and for the future. And we did this by having Prem Chandavarkar, an architect who's also a writer, presenting a very critical contextualization of India's modernity. And he actually looks at the piece that, that has come up several times in today's launch, Mulk Raj Anand's Planning and Dreaming, as well as two other pieces, which are, were published in the first issue. And he starts analyzing it to show us what are the paradoxes in, modernity in India. And what are the complex ways in which the local and the global are intertwined? And how are these related these ideas from the past related to our present and how do we take them forward. So that's what, the archive section tries to do.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Indira. Yeah. Now that you have an idea of the contents of the magazine, the new Marg, I wanted to have you take a look at the cover and devote a little time to the cover. The earlier issues of Marg, as you would have seen when Mrinalini showed you, usually had a sedate, standalone image which was eloquent in itself. Now, to describe that our departure from that approach, we have with us Karthik Kalyanaraman and his brother Raghava, who runs 64 by 1, an artist collective in Bangalore. They have designed the cover of the new Marg. And 64 by 1 is they curated the first global gallery show of art made by artificial intelligence. And their attempt has been to blur the boundaries between art criticism, and art education. Now, Karthik is a conceptual artist and a former academic, and he has done key research on causality in statistics. He has published on social networks and aesthetic theory. Raghava is an acclaimed artist and who has worked in multiple disciplines. He has written too in the current issue for us. He figures on CNN's list of the 10 most remarkable people of the year and in the Netflix documentary, The Creative Indians. So I will hand this over to you now, Karthik and Raghava. Thank you.
First of all, thank you so much for that introduction, Nandini. I almost don't recognize myself. But first of all, the first thing I have to mention is it was an extremely collaborative enterprise. We designed the art object you see in the cover, but the actual cover itself was collaboratively designed with Sarita, Sundar, and Georgie of Hanno. So it was very much a collaborative enterprise in times of COVID, with no professional photographers easily available during lockdown. So it was very much a collaborative enterprise. I just want to start out by mentioning that. Nandini talked about the difference between the old cover and the new cover in her own way. I'll talk about it slightly differently. For me, the old cover was the difference between the old cover and the new cover was kind of like the difference between a representative of an ideal democracy and a citizen. Representative is faceless. I mean, he just is someone picked from among the inhabitants, which is the images inside. A representative is not supposed to have personality. She just represents. She illustrates. Whereas the new cover was a citizen, had an active stance towards the issue, had a personality, and at the same time was part of that republic, which is that magazine. So that was the way we thought about the difference between the old cover and the new cover. So of course, this concept developed very much in conversation with the Marg team. And when we heard the concept, we loved it. We loved this idea because it gave artists a creative freedom. And the other two reasons we absolutely said we have to do this is, first of all, Marg was going through this journey of reinvention, which was eerily parallel to the kind of reinvention Raghava and I were going through at the same time. Raghava is going to talk a little bit more about that. That word reinvention has come up a lot, and Raghava is going to talk about what it actually means and what does personality have to do with it. I'll tell you the second reason. Second reason is something a lot to do with what other people have mentioned, which is Marg asking us, sort of insider, outsider artists who've done crazy stuff like AI art, or we've done performance art, except for a multimedia performance art, except for an audience of stockbrokers. Yeah, we did that. It's more like it's kind of like Prince Hal consorting with Mistress Quickly and Falstaff, or more to the point, a knockoff Rajinikanth, which is my brother there, who's sitting there so staid, and wannabe second-rate Persian poet. So that inclusiveness of vision really, really floored us. So it was a no-go. So in terms of how we actually responded to that specific topic, crisis and continuity, well, I think Deeptha talked about the relentlessness of images that have been coming our way during this pandemic. And what we wanted to do is not that. Because I think we've all had enough of abyss gazing. I mean, that's this beautiful coinage that's going around. It's from Nietzsche's aphorism: if you gaze long enough into the abyss gazes back into you. I think in times like this, you know, I mean, I'm reminded suddenly now in the flow, I'm reminded of this, the last lines of the poem, famous poem, September 1st, 1939 by Yeats, in which he ends that poem, written during the World War, saying, beleaguered by the same negation and despair to show an affirming flame. That's what we wanted to do. So it was crisis and continuity, but we did not want to place a hyper focus on crisis. We wanted to see crisis not the way it's usually seen as catastrophe, which is informed very much by sort of a religious apocalyptic imagination, but rather as a species of change, which is also part of that cover. We wanted to see it as something that affords both a possibility for reinvention and maintains that thread of continuity despite how drastic the changes. So that was the stance we took based on the cover. In terms of what that cover means, I think one of the most boring things to hear is artists go on and on and on about what that cover means. I'll just tell you what we wanted it to do. I think what we wanted it to do was to be a multi-layered image, which not only reflected the journey of Marg and reinvention, but also talk personally to the catastrophes that Raghava and I feel are extremely, extremely important. One is, of course, climate change, which is essentially a catastrophe of energy consumption. So you'll notice that the constructed objects in that image are made out of electric adapters and battery phone chargers. And of course, also, you know, the old form of power, which was draft animal, biological power. And secondly, also to talk about, of course, the reference to zoonotic diseases is there with the red cow, and also to talk about the other catastrophe, which is automation, which is replacing biological power. So those are the kinds of references we wanted to make. Ultimately, what you see depends on you. Of course, you can also read it through the lens of caste, as Rajyashri Goody reminded us usefully, because a cow is not apolitical anymore. We know that. And if you try and think about whether a cow, it's Hindu philosophy to not eat cows. Well, which Hindu? Then caste comes in once you start asking questions like that. So we wanted definitely a multi-layered image, but the most important part of the whole thing, and this is I'm going to bring Raghava into the conversation very shortly, is we wanted the process itself to be a trope of reinvention. Not just the object, but the process. So what do I mean by that? Well, the object itself is constructed both out of something found and something made. And the found thing happens to be this old cart that I remember pulling along when I was maybe 6 or 7 without my knickers along. There's a photograph of it too, actually. Pulling it along, and it was lying in the attic somewhere. Now, how do I take that, the heritage of the past, of craft, respect it? And this is something Sarita is very, very keen on. You can't take traditional art and do whatever you want with it. You have to respect it. And at the same time, make it our own, Raghava and Raghava's and my own. And we changed the structure, we played around with it. But the main thing I wanted to kind of leave you with a question is, in moments of crisis like this, you know, in moments of change, in moments of palpable constitutional crisis, someone else mentioned that. Can a homemade ramshackle aesthetics take a different kind of approach than the high production value aesthetic that we've been used to in the contemporary art world, or the somewhat melancholy post-Marxist stance that we are all too familiar with? So that is the question I think I would like to leave you with. I did keep mentioning one of the constant themes in this was reinvention. So I'd like to bring Raghava in. He's a master of reinvention. I don't know if he's one of the 10 most interesting people to know in the world. For sure, he's one of the 10 most confusing people to know in the world because he's done so many different things. So I would like to bring him into the conversation to talk a little bit more about reinvention, what it means to have a personality. What does it mean to change personalities? Go ahead, Raga.
Thanks, Karthik. I'll take it from here. Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, speaking of conflict, one of the funniest things that happened was I was going through a divorce, and this is to someone I thought I'm going to grow old with. At the same time, I moved to India, and Karthik and I are talking about what is the purpose of living. We're talking distance into a party, and I feel discomfort, or I'm dealing with a life crisis. I realized that crisis happens for me when two truths within me that I believe in are in conflict. They're fighting. And with Karthik, the conversation was really, should I believe in this truth or this truth? What is true anymore? And at that point, we realized that our personality only exists way in which we resolve this conflict. That's what makes Raghava, or you, an artist. And we realized also that what is personality in this age where the word brand has lost all dignity, and it's almost like this dirty thing to say I'm building a brand. I felt that the only promise we can actually make the world is our personality, is our brand. But here's the difference. For me, the difference between brand and personality is that personality evolves. A brand is a promise. It's stuck in stone. It's a commitment. Whereas personality is a dance between all your binaries. It's like, am I conceptual? Am I aesthetic? Am I a family man? Am I an artist? Am I a citizen? Am I an individual? And all of these conflicts are all true, but the way you resolve it makes you who you are. So this conversation is about really this world we live in today. Everything is a performance, everything, as Karthik and I were talking about. So if it's a performance, let's be honest and not talk about truth. Let's talk about honesty. And let's be serious about the way we confuse binaries. And for me, that is through play, through mischief, through engagement, through serious play. So with that, I'll leave you with just one thought. For me, reinvention has been at the core of who I am, and that's what's kept me feeling alive and feeling engaged. And right now, I'm reinventing myself again because during COVID, my entire career came to a standstill. And I had big plans, museum shows, travels, everything went to a standstill. At that point, I realized that perhaps Instagram is the best gallery to create a new kind of performance, a new kind of relationship with branding, to give dignity to personality, which for me has slowly lost its significance. As Karthik says, the citizen versus the institution, the nation. So I hope you enjoy I'm very excited to get my copy, and thank you so much for involving us. This isn't a conversation. This is not a resolution. It is just us playing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Raghava. Hi everyone, I'm Anjana Premchand, the brand manager at Marg. While Mrinalini and Nandini took us to the new avatar of the magazine and spoke about Marg over the decades, I would like to shift focus a little and talk about our efforts to strengthen Marg as a brand, as an inclusive organization and as a cultural path. So since Marg has been around for decades, we have seen several beginnings, the first fax, the first telephone, the first computer, and so on. Sort of catching up with technology has been a constant for us, especially to keep our content going. And it has often been a challenge, especially with our limited resources. Recently, we've had to shift our systems online to sort of cope with the pandemic and still continue to publish and reach our audience. We hope that this helps us to be more self-sustainable in the future and for the decades to come. Keeping this in mind, I would like to invite Sebi Thomas, our management consultant, who has worked on rewiring all our systems. And like Rizio said, he's been a part of our organization now, and he's really helping us. Sebi if you could share a little about your experience with Marg, the scope of the current work, and where you see us in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Sanjana. And I'm really delighted to be here with all of you today. And in fact, for last 1 hour or more, it's been very interesting conversations. I've really enjoyed being at this place in the first place. So with 25 years of my background in technology and business management, I have always felt that the boundaries between the art and science need to blur. So Marg, for me, has been an opportunity to experience that at very close quarters. The journey so far, what Anjana was talking about, has convinced me that art and culture is not a domain for a few, but it touches of us all. Now, my journey with Marg started with Rizio reaching out to me for a requirement of reviewing an intercom vendor's proposal. And what followed were multiple visits and interactions with Marg team and reviewing and revisiting of many other concerns. I really cherished those interactions with the team, and the Marg team had some very good, great ideas, and it is their energy that has brought about this transformation, which is, of course, is a work in progress. Now, let me quickly give you an overview of the processes that we have gone through in this last 2 years with this tech. Yeah, so you can see there, we're talking about these 6 major milestones, and just rushing it through that. It involved a revamping of the Marg website and making it more holistic, a critical study of a financial model, and an in-depth analysis of our reader base for more than 5 decades. And Ishaat did touch about it from the beginning. And understanding the need for a sustenance model. Now, the restructuring of our team was quite integral, and along with that was our internal digital revolution that Anjana just spoke about right now, which what has happened is which made it not just possible to work through this pandemic, but bring in this new magazine with the team working from across India. Now, that's something which has been possible because of this entire digital transformation that has been done. Now, and to support the change that Marg has been driving, many people came on board to help. Ishaat did make a mention of that. For instance, Bain and Company is now helping us towards shaping the roadmap, and we are thankful to them. The most important experience personally for me has been the realization that how precious this space is and the importance of 75 years of its engagement with the cultural knowledge. Now, personally, I feel enriched. And I think of how this could more people can be impacted of that. And throughout these conversations, I keep hearing these words of inclusiveness. Now, what should be done to make it reach out? What is stopping it from being in the hands of the youth, professionals, and art enthusiasts alike? I'm putting myself in that because I come from that kind of a fraternity who's outside of art. It's not the cost. It's well within the reach of even a student. So there was a need to evolve and adapt to the changing times, both in terms of language and form, and I heard some of the speakers talking about it. An urgent need to reach out to a wider spectrum of society, irrespective of the profession and age, and it clearly serves both ends. So the new magazine, as I see it, it provides a point of connect for all, with offering a scope to educate and elevate oneself within its sections. When we talked about the art study and architecture, which Nandini spoke of. Now, I can see Marg magazine in its new avatar in the hands of every thinking individual and not defined by any boundaries. And I quite like the design and the feel of it. And it's something I would like to hold. In fact, the design kind of holds it together, the complete magazine. So yeah, thank you, Anjana, and actually Marg for making me part of this.
Thank you, Sebi. Thanks. Like Sebi said, the website has become very crucial for us, especially in the times of the pandemic. We are continuously working on it, obviously, but I would like to thank Kinnari Thakur and Kiran Nambiar of First Main. They have been working on this project with us since January of 2019, and they continue to do so as we scale up. Kiran, Kinnari, could you share a bit about working on the website and the challenges and scope that a magazine like Marg faces when it wants to go digital first today?
Thanks, Anjana. Yeah, I think that our engagement with Marg really started with a bottom-up platform redo in terms of the user experience. It was key to us that we used new platforms and tools that are built for scalability and self-reliance. Marg being a small team, self-reliance and sustainability is a very important part of that job, and therefore, choosing a platform that enables that was an important consideration. Our challenge was really to build a website that meets the needs of the Marg brand, all of its communication, all of the different ways in which it needs to engage its users, and commerce, and integrates commerce within that. And like Ishaat has said before, and Diana, I think that really one of the advantages of the web and everything digital today is that we are not limited by geography and the physical distribution of a magazine, but really it is accessible to anyone with internet. And this is really where that inclusivity comes in as well, because and that's a very important consideration as Marg grows and grows to evolve and include more people into its journey. So what we built really was the first step, what we in the product design world call an MVP, a minimal viable product that works to do these things, that enables this business to kind of function digitally. But this is just the start, and there really is so much more to do. We all know that the publishing industry is going through an existential crisis, like Ishaat had described before, and there are a lot of new definitions to what it means to publish digitally, and especially digitally speaking on the web. And to be digital first today really means a lot of new forms of interactive content that utilizes engagement opportunities that the web offers, like sharing, making notes, annotating, highlighting, searching. All of these things is what makes interactive content important and native to the digital medium. And going beyond words into creative storytelling via Marg salons, videos, podcasts, there's endless opportunities with augmented reality. And, as we hear artists speak somewhere, I think that it's really across mediums, across channels. And that really is what the web allows to experience in so many different forms. And that is what is exciting about this engagement, and that really is what is exciting for what the future of Marg could hold. There are so many different monetization strategies that are inclusive towards different types of readers. Like Sebi said, it's not really about price point. It's not the price point that is a hindrance. It really is, reaching different users in innovative ways. And there's so much more that the web affords. So I do think that, speaking from Kiran and me, both at First Main, we do feel that what we've built here is really just the first step. And it's an excellent base. And now it really is time to get to work and do all of those things that we really want to do to enhance this mission.
Thank you, Kinnari and Kiran. This is again a very important year for Marg. We're entering our 75th year, and we really felt the need to sort of plan and scale up. And this meant that the foundation should have its own unique identity as compared to the magazine. And we needed to sort of strengthen that aspect. And our branding consultants, Sarita Sundar and Georgie Paul of Hanno, have really made this possible. They have also redesigned the new magazine and given it a very contemporary look and feel. Sarita and Georgie, if you could share a bit about your process and take us through the new branding and the new look of the magazine. Thanks.
I'll run you through some of the images, but before that, I'll just give you a bit of a background, and Georgie will go through some of the details as well. We at Hanno had always been very keen on working on projects that connect to the archives. But I have to say that it was with a mix of excitement and trepidation that we took up this challenge, because recognizing that the social cultural space today is vastly different from what existed during Marg's inception 75 years back, the challenge we really had was how to help Marg Foundation position itself afresh and renew itself, and yet carry the legacy that makes it what it is. So I think, Rizio, we met with you about a year back or so, and then with the Marg team in early December of 2019, and spoke quite a few times. To get a sense, we really felt the need to understand from the beginning what it is that makes Marg iconic, though I have sort of grown up with the Marg magazine, looking at it in libraries or at home. But also, we also wanted to get a sense of where really Marg wished to go. And for that, what we did was we created what we call a spirit guide. And the first page of which, one of the pages is there. I'll just take you through it. In this guide, what we did was we used this metaphor of the path of the river and used an abstracted line to take us through our story. So we spoke of the ripples, the eddies of thought and ideas in Marg, as well as the intermingling of the popular and the classic, the juxtaposition of art and science. We showed in this book how Marg has constantly redefined its flow and ebb with layered creative and intellectual articulations, spurring change. And as it encounters events, provocations, and affirmative stimuli, it is altering its course, just like a river. This document for us and for the Marg organization represents really the soul of Marg, its very spirit, and the guiding principles that line Marg's new pathways. We'll share with you a few of the pages of the booklet, which ultimately aims to ensure the long-term guardianship of Marg Foundation's vision. In this spread of the guide, we speak of Marg's vision to champion the brilliance of the gutsy adventure. Rajnikant, that demigod of dreams, possessing a sort of cocky confidence in his own ability to get out of tricky situations, even as he's crusading against celluloid villains and aging in his unique way. It is bravery, yes, but it is also just about knowing how to stay relevant. In Tamil, those sort of forms read, En vari, Tanni vari, my way is my own. It's kind of, I find it very, very uncanny and magical how Rajnikant manages to weave his way into everything. Just a while back, Karthik was referencing his brother as a sort of Rajnikant avatar of sorts. In the next page, we speak of Marg's aim to seek out the illumination of diversity and discourse. Sufi poetry, we felt here, reflects Marg's thinking through verses laden with metaphor and simile, invoking modern belief patterns like humanity, pluralism, and peace. And here we also use, taking that line language again, use a play of visual puns where the river becomes these intertwined and sort of up and down birds. In the next page, we look at the idea of Marg wanting to sort of transform the spark of yesterday into the genius of tomorrow, in a sense, looking at the idea of legacy. And here we actually reference the Kerala writer Vaikom Bashi's absurdist tale of a woman mired in past glories and epitomized by her grandfather and the fact that he owned an elephant, a matter of great prestige in Kerala. here the play happens when the river slowly sort of emerges as an elephant. Georgie now will sort of show you through some of the Marg logo interpretations that we've done. Georgie?
Yeah. So hi guys, just wanted to quickly take you through some of the things that we worked on for Marg and how we approached it. I'm sure a lot of you readers and supporters will eventually encounter it in some form or the other over time. So like Sebi had shared a slide with 6 points, that's where really the whole brand exercise, I believe, began. With the whole restructuring and reorganization, a new website, a new brand. So we are one of those, I believe, 6 points, tasked with creating a visual system for the entire Marg identity, separated from the magazine and the foundation, keep it clear, consistent, easy for new members to join, make it the whole thing approachable. So what I think we've sort of been successful in marrying that heritage of Marg and bringing it into the 21st century. The thing about working with a brand like Marg is today, a lot of our clients are startups and they're, starting out today, and everything is socially, culturally, everything is based in the modern era. But the chance to work on a brand like Marg, which comes with 75 years of the rich visual culture, very rare. So we instinctively kind of knew that ignoring whatever has been done so far, starting with a fresh slate, was not an option. So what we did was sort of went through all the existing assets, all the archival issues of Marg, and what really stood out to us was some of the classic logos that Marg had for the magazine mastheads. And from one of those classic logos, the M really stood out to us as a very strong, bold visual form, in a very positive looking stroke. And that M became a very strong marker for us to build the visual brand. And it allowed us also to create a device to separate the Marg Foundation identity while still retaining a connection to the original Marg magazines that started this whole thing. And that became a big block for to different identity system. So the next slide, one of the things, one of the identity elements that I'd like to focus on is this seal that was used, I believe around 1947 on some of the early Marg covers. This seal was four intertwining birds, and this is a mythical bird called the Annapakshi, which is a half goose, half peacock, and it is supposedly a symbol of wisdom, grace, and creative force. In that sense, it is a very apt visual metaphor for the entire brand. So we set about making this one of the key elements of the branding system. And we tried out quite a few renditions of the seal, digitized it, vectorized it using whatever our software allowed us to do. We tried hand-drawn versions, and eventually it evolved into this form that you see on the right, which is sort of modern, free-flowing, because we've gotten rid of that external circular bounding box. At the same time, it's more production and digital friendly. We created another version of it, a simplified version of it, which some of you may spot being used on the website and in the magazine for when it is used in a small size. And if you go to the next slide, you can see how by applying our new brand color palette, it sort of makes it very visually striking. It kind of instantly modernizes it. We can use it as a pattern. We can repeat it. We can really blow it up, make it very graphic. And that is how we sort of set about building the foundation identity. Now, the next slide sort of delves into it shows the new Marg magazine logo, which is, a very big landmark moment, I believe, in the history of the magazine, because it's not very often that magazines change their masthead and cover image layouts. And the main thing we did here is we didn't really mess about too much with the visual aspect of the logo. We sort of enhanced its readability. Some of you may recall the earlier Marg logo, which had a disconnected descender on the G. We sort of tweaked that to create a new G that reflected that positivity of the M. We made the A and the R a bit more easily readable. And a large part of the exercise, which Marg will roll out in the next coming months and years, is we created a lot of rules around the usage of this logo and which allows it to exist as part of a much larger system and separates it very clearly from the foundation identity. So that is where we are at the branding stage. The next few slides are of the magazine. So if you could go to the next slide, please. I'm not going to, yeah, this is, Sarita, do you want to quickly talk about this, the idea behind this visual here that we see?
Yeah, here we actually were toying with the idea, and we kept sort of trying to figure out if we could do various sort of vernacular versions of the logo. That proved to be a bit of a challenge, but at the same time, we felt it important that we should in some way convey the idea that of this inclusivity, a word that I think we've used a lot today. And again, this is another one of the patterns that we believe can be used in various graphic applications along with the emblem. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next slide, now next few slides show a few spreads from the magazine. You know, they're just 4 or 5. We don't want to ruin the joy of discovering that printed issue for the first time. So just quickly, you know, our aim with the whole magazine redesign was to make it fairly modular. The idea behind that was to allow the design team to create a fresh looking issue every time, you know, and allow them to different systems of creating visual storytelling, which was something some of the archival issues were very, very, you know, handled very well, very rich visuals, hand drawn. Really, that hand drawn element really brought out that human story. And if you go to the next slide, yeah, the contents page, for example, it's not just a text listing. It's sort of quite visual in its nature, and it allows us to focus on important stories, allows us to be very flexible in terms of layout and production. And also another key highlight of this issue is the kind of separators that we brought in that really, you know, visually arrest the reading and tell you that you are entering a new section with the huge, you know, the more contemporary serif type and things like that. And at the same time, we've sort of, if you go to the next slide, you know, is another spread from the Garo architecture article, sort of showing you how we've sort of integrated a far more visually rich spread. You know, allow this kind of system, it allows us to include a lot more photos while keeping, if you go to the next slide, it's a similar system that carries on, but at the same time here, it allows us to revert back to a more classic form of magazine where you have more text and more content that can be read. And I think the last couple of slides talk about, you know, how the magazine ends with the archival section where, you know, like Indra had talked about the archive section. It sort of delves into the modern critical analysis and some of the archival articles. And what we've done here is kind of liberally borrowed from some of the rich archival imagery that was there, but sort of treated it in a very contemporary manner to bring it into the, you know, make it relevant for today's audience. So yeah, that's it from us regarding the magazine layout. Just a quick few insights into how the process worked.
Thank you, Sarita and Georgie. We at Marg want to dream and do much more in the future. And with this, I'd like to invite Rizio Johanan, our CEO and publisher, who will talk about the way ahead and introduce our partners. Rizio, you're muted, I believe.
Can you hear me? Yeah? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Anjana, and hello, everyone. We are really, short of time here, but this is the last segment, but it's perhaps the most important also. What has just been outlined is a dream we are reclaiming from 75 years back. As many of our friends mentioned, we are only trying to give it a new shape, relevant for our times, and could help us connect with people, especially the youth, from various fields of knowledge and creativity. So for us, this difficult 2020 has been a new path to explore. It's a species of change that we embrace. I think we made more friends and did more work and connected more than ever as a team, sitting in our remote locations through these last 6 months. As what has come out of this time has already been talked about elaborately by my colleagues and everyone else, I would like to share a few of our plans for the days to come and introduce some of our partners in this crime. This is a time when it's becoming more and more difficult to function as an NGO for reasons all of us know. That brings us to the new Marg that we launched today. This would be near impossible without a grant we received from BNP Paribas India Foundation, especially now when most companies are spending their CSR funds only on direct COVID relief, and many cultural and intellectual spaces have already closed down. We are thankful to BNP for walking with us on this new path. We have with us Franciska, country head of BNP Paribas, and Shankar, head of BNP Paribas India Foundation. I request Franciska to share with us why BNP chose to support this change at Marg. Franciska, over to you.
Okay, so hello everyone, all you art lovers, friends, contributors, partners, and stakeholders of Marg. So first of all, thank you, Marg, and you, Ridio, and the whole team for inviting me to share some of the thoughts on the occasion of your Diamond Jubilee celebrations. So congratulations for that. So maybe some of the thoughts, first of all, without art and artistic expression, human civilization would really be very incomplete and even hollow. And perhaps that is why artistic expression has taken its inspiration from society and has inspired societies for millennia now. It really connects humankind through a shared imaginary world in unlimited forms of expression, and it offers us emotional, individual, and also collective experiences. And so BNP Paribas, particularly through its different foundations in different countries, of which in India, promotes and supports performing arts. Through its patronage, it is the objective that we give artists time and the attention they need to fully dedicate themselves at their creative expression. And such partnerships are based on trust, mutual respect, and shared values. They have been extended to major cultural institutions, such as Marg, thus establishing opportunities for meaningful interaction between and across art forms. So on these lines, our association with Marg is a way to find new expression in the field of art and architecture, and seeks to engage and augment interest in Indian art and culture. We support the different expressions of Marg, so not just the periodic issues of which we have been talking a lot and which are of course central in your reinvention, but also books to pause and to think, such as our support on the book of An Interpretative History of Paper Money in India. It presents a retrospect of India's currency and banknotes from the 18th century to the present day, and is covering in this way the last 200 years. We value a lot the association we are building with Marg, and we are very proud of this association, because we value the professionalism of the Marg team, and it has been shown tonight again that you have really so deeply thought of everything you do, that you have really, this whole reinvention, you have seen it as a holistic story. It has to be perfect in all dimensions, and this is really what you're doing. So we like a lot the passion you have for your mission and all the energy you all put into it. And amongst many other things, there are two distinctively inspiring yet creatively intimidating elements that I feel connected to on this occasion tonight. First of all, reinventing and reimagining oneself as Marg does today. It's incredible. Society has evolved rapidly in the last decades. more than in the previous decades. And so there is a compelling reason to reimagine and reinvent ourselves, but it is not an easy thing to do. So we feel very much connected to that journey that you are going through, because it, as a bank, for example, also in this digital era, we also have to reinvent ourselves for the clients of tomorrow. And we know what it takes: a lot of courage, a lot of passion, a lot of ambition. And the second thing is that the liberal connect that Marg has established in the society today is, we think, very and extremely important. It is from such a creative and intellectual pursuits that new limitless ideas find their expressions. And with the explosion of information, the quiet is difficult to find. So at BNP Paribas, we hope that many more curious and interested readers will find their way through the new Marg creations and will feel enriched by them. So on behalf of BNP Paribas and the foundation, we wish Marg at least another 75 years of an impressive journey. And we would like to be together with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Franciska. We hope to continue working with you and to bring a change to the engagement with the arts in the country in the coming days, certainly. You have been such tremendous support to us. While sustained material support is critical for an organization like Marg, one of the important factors that would influence our intellectual and cultural continuation is the way we are going to engage, explore, and innovate, the ways in which we would deal with ideas and practices. Today, we understand Marg as a path on which this drive must be carried out. We seek to see what happens at unexpected meetings. You heard many of our friends speaking about this. These are unexpected meetings that we had through this last year. Actually, this is the new path, new Marg that we are envisaging. And that interactive space, today we are announcing a new collaboration with Leonardo Publications of the MIT Press at the intersection of art and science. Leonardo has been a pioneering force for the last 50 years in the space of art and science. And we are calling the forum, we are creating Salam. Of course, it's the best way to greet someone in these times. We, of course, like the etymology of the term, and it stands for, this Salam stands for Science and Art with Leonardo and Marg. Salam. So we have with us Roger Malina, astrophysicist and executive editor of Leonardo, and Diana Ayton-Shenker, the CEO of Leonardo. May I request Roger to talk about Salam and Diana to say a few words about what this association with Marg means to Leonardo. Thank Roger and Diana.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rizzio. First, happy birthday to Marg. Leonardo turned 50 2 years ago. We're your younger sister. Yes, it takes a family to survive. And I want to just thank Diana for taking over the leadership of Leonardo over the last year. And I just want to put the seed of a metaphor. She is a nimble leader. She leads by enabling other people to lead. And it's just been so wonderful seeing Diana make our organization change its vision of the future. And before I keep going, thank you, Diana. I'd just like you to say a few words. We're going to try and make this a little bit dialogic, and you'll understand why when I finish my remarks. Diana.
Well, thank you, Roger. I really appreciate that, and such an honor to be included in this celebration, commencing Marg's next stage and growth. My intention is to be as a nimble leader, leading by listening, by learning, by serving, and seeing where there are these interconnections. So I appreciated Karthik speaking of how collaborative the process was to come into this moment for Marg. I loved the imagery shared of the river as the journey of this process of reinvention that embodies art and science, where we find ourselves through Leonardo. My vision for the future of Leonardo and our relationship with Marg is that it is we are part of the movement to becoming more human and more humane. As a species, for change, the vision we see of change that we want to embody is becoming more human and more humane. And that means being dynamic and alive and living, as our colleagues spoke of personality over brand. It means looking at that balance of crisis and continuity as an opportunity to showcase, as the Auden poem cites, show an affirming flame. And I think that Leonardo, as a think tank enterprise of sharing ideas and driving innovation at this nexus of art, science, technology, is looking to ignite that affirming flame that humanizes who we are and who we are becoming. And I see
Diana, you're mixing metaphors. I thought it was a river, not a fire.
Well, that's what we do when we mix ideation, we mix perspectives, we allow for the imagination to mix metaphors. So the river brings us to ignite fires, and the fires change the course of the river, because we live in a world where we have both.
It was a hard crane metaphor. Sorry for the interruption.
No, I welcome it, Karthik, because we live in a world where there are rivers and there are fires, and they are both changing, and they are changing us.
And that gets us into other topics. But I'd like to give another thank you to Sundar Sarukkai. Thank you, Sundar. You are one of the people that changed my mind forever. I remember us eating paella on the beaches of Barcelona, discussing, arguing, interchanging, and you had just been working on this idea of the ethics of curiosity. Well, I'm an astrophysicist. Curiosity is childlike, it's innocent. We explore the world. Sundar said, no, curiosity is an ethical problem. When do you stop looking? When do you stop making? And Sundar, that simple idea has changed my life. And thank you again for the time we spent eating paella on the beach of Barcelona.
Thank you, Roger.
Do you remember that conversation?
Yes, very much, very much. Yeah.
And obviously I've read everything you've done, and you've influenced me in other ways. But this very simple idea that in Western culture, curiosity went from a Christian sin to a scientific innocence. Anyway, I also want to just thank Nandini for putting in my head the phrase ecology of courage. And it's such a simple idea, and it's a different way of talking about nimble leadership, that it's a group of people that we want to exhibit genius. We don't want any more geniuses like Leonardo da Vinci, no more male geniuses specifically, but how do groups of people collectively exhibit the genius we need in the ecology of courage. So Diana, you found?
Yeah, so I also was very struck and inspired by this language that Nandini brought to our attention, written by our friend Rizio, Dr. Yohanan, that ultimately what I see for Leonardo in the space of engagement, collaboration with Marg, is helping to animate this ecology of courage. And to recognize that the ecology of courage, like all ecologies, is a living dynamic system.
Yeah.
So in thinking of the work our colleagues spoke of living cities, that the core elements that allow for these ecologies, the ecology of courage, I think requires collaborative, creative work. And our collaborative, creative curiosity is a driving force of this ecology of courage. And boy, if ever there was a time that we need courage and that we need
let's
to see
jump
it
in on
as
that,
an ecology,
Diana.
it's now.
So,
yeah.
Yes, we don't want any more male geniuses, please. We want groups of people to behave with properties that we ascribe to genius to navigate through the ecology of courage. The other metaphor that I've been using here locally is, and as I think it was, I forget who it was talking about AI art. Humans are beginning to collaborate with artificial intelligences, and that's a wonderful opportunity in the ethics of curiosity. So, let's think about the design of AI. But part of that thinking is, how do we enable collective intelligence rather than collective stupidity? And unfortunately, I live in a country, the United States, where the internet is accelerating collective stupidity. It's the tragedy of the internet as deep as the tragedy of the commons in Western society hundreds of years ago. So how do we build collective empathy, collective courage, collective inclusiveness, collective reinvention?
Well, those are the questions. Those are the questions that hopefully we'll continue to grapple with through this collaboration and our collective engagement, that the spark of genius is something that we all are I believe, born with. And it's on us to accelerate and honor the spaces in which that can find expression. And while Leonardo embodied that as the individual lone, hero genius, we want to not deny that, but expand how we share access to that spark of genius. And as we do, we share its benefits with generosity, with humility, with inclusivity.
And just my last comment, again, thank you, Nandini. I'm delighted to be an animal in your ecology of courage.
I just want to say, Roger, that is Rizio's phrase, which I was quoting from the magazine.
Okay, so that's a collective intelligence. You were the one that put it in my head.
Oh,
but no, if you're a plant, there's someone who plants the seed, someone who picks the plant, someone who eats the seeds.
Yeah, we all have a role.
And so I apologize for over thanking you, but in collective, in the ecology of courage, we need to do that a lot.
Thanks a lot.
Both Rizio and Nandini, but also the whole team here today.
Thank you, Diana and Roger, and we hope our salam will go places. For me, it is really rewarding to hear this ecology of passionate voices at this meeting. Of course, it is one thing to dream like this, but to manifest that all this that we dream of, it requires the faith and support of many more people. If we are not able to garner that, these dreams will remain dreams. Mrinalini read out what our founder, Mulk Raj Anand, wrote in his vision in 1946. But at that time, he wrote that in thinking that, like, he also had this hope that with his fellow artists, architects, he will be able to realize that dream. But at this time, I'm also reminded of what he wrote in 1963, nearly 2 decades after Marx's inception. And I quote, "We must confess that we failed to generate a movement," he wrote. And he attributed this failure to 2 reasons. One, the disintegration of the original Marg collective, the Modern Architectural Research Group. And 2, and I think this is the most important, which might even have led to the disintegration of the group. I quote Mulk, "The fact that our intelligentsia did not respond very eagerly to our initiatives in stimulating thought. Yet, Marg has continued and provided a platform for many scholars and writers to publish their work, documenting some rare cultural sites and phenomena, mainly due to the perseverance of generations of Marg's loyal staff and a small group of supporters who believed in Mulk's dream. Now again, we are beginning a movement. Times have changed, our cultures have transformed themselves, and the nature of philanthropy also. We are vulnerable here. The nature of this meeting shows that we are not picture perfect. We are coming forth with all our vulnerabilities, but we are still beginning a movement, believing, like Mulk and his friends, yet again, that with the help of our fellow thinkers, we may discover a new sense of direction. I say this because I'm sure there is no reward in walking this Marg alone at this time. We need this to become a people's Marg, because even our most righteous pleas for social and cultural well-being will fade out as mere events if we do not nurture and sustain an intellectual environment in this country and the world at large. But as Mulk realized, this is not easy. There is dismissal, there is indifference, sometimes even motiveless hostility. For instance, the other day we got a surprising response from the head of an academic department in an important institution. He declined our invitation to attend this event, and he said we must close down Marg rather than deviating like we are apparently doing now. See, we have no quarrels about people having differences with us if they critically, analytically engage with what we are doing. But it is a matter of serious concern when teachers and cultural leaders make assumptive statements like this without even interacting once with us, or even seeing a copy of what many minds and hands have toiled to make. And that too, when heads of institutions who have the power to decide what their libraries must offer impose their prejudice on our children and close them to conversations. I say this only because at this moment we empathize with Mulk, who wrote that 1963 editorial with all his directness and honesty. This is yet another beginning, and all we request is your creative and critical engagement so that this Marg of inquiry may continue to inform our public's relationship with the arts. We open conversations that are important for our thinking young people's futures. That brings me to these lines from a poem by one of my best loved writers, Adil Jasawala. In his poem, Elora, a site which is close to Marg's heart too, Adil speaks about going to these caves with his camera in an attempt to make a connect with what is artistically depicted there. I quote, "Because that's what happens whenever I try to connect. You being you will never be caught on camera, at least not on my camera. And I being I will continue to shoot from all angles." These lines somehow catch the spirit of our doing at Marg today. And we continue to do with a keen awareness that Marg is not a linear road. It is an attitude of resilient adventure, an ecology of courage, as I put it in the vision, and vision revisited, that helps one to be on the road. Marg has always been that spirit, and we are not doing anything extra Marg by reimagining ourselves. It is just the Marg thing to do at this time. So in the coming days, you will also see many collaborative ventures at Marg. Next week, for instance, on 14th of October, we have our next webinar in the series Futures of Art Studies. We start a collaboration with Cornell University South Asia program titled Art in the Age of Blockchain. It may not be the old Marg, but this is the path that we will have to go now, today. And I hope to see all of you there next week. We are also in discussions with publishers abroad to make Marg more easily available outside India. And in the December issue, we have some brilliant conversations around the theme of cultural well-being, especially in the context of the newly appointed Cultural Committee. And we are also joining hands with Kochi Biennale. I mentioned some of these only to indicate the significance of dynamically conserving Marg, which is a road that will continue beyond all of us. We are all aware of that. It has come 75 years, and we don't think that we are going to take it to its logical conclusion. No, Marg will continue. But at this moment, every subscription counts, every social media support post matters, every penny is precious. And we hope you will all be with us on this journey. Give us critical feedback on the work we do, so we can constantly improve and bring the latest in cultural thinking and practice to the larger public. Before I close, I must mention that the most important factor that made this possible for us to make this change is the Marg team. Many people have talked about the Marg team, but for me personally, this has been an incredible experience working with this team. I came suddenly into their midst like 2 years back, but their tenacity, resilience, and industry have amazed me. They have been truly heroic, and not even taking a weekend off for many months. It has been 24/7 for the team. I don't have enough words to thank them, so perhaps it is best that we close this evening with a thanksgiving by the team to all those who have made this possible for us to be here and now. Here they come, the Maldives.
To all our clients in the retail trade, comprising bookstores, lifestyle outlets, and subscription agents, thank you so much for your support and trust. To all subscribers, individuals, and institutions, we are so grateful for the trust you have placed in us and sincerely hope you continue to support our publication. Dio Bore Guru.
വർണ്ണിപ്പാൻ വാക്കുകളില്ല എണ്ണിയാൽ തീരുന്നില്ല നീ ചെയ്ത അനുഗ്രഹങ്ങൾ. Heartfelt gratitude to Marg's collaborators, media partners, and corporate donors who have participated in Marg's Read a Book program. Thank you.
Thank you, Marg advertisers. Thank you, Marg magazine and book supporters. And thank you, Marg Read a Book CSR Marg Initiative program supporters.
आमचे सर्व टायपसेटर्स, प्रोसेसर्स आणि प्रिंटर्स, विशेषतः टाटा प्रेस यांनी केलेल्या अमूल्य सहकार्याबद्दल आम्ही त्यांचे मनपूर्वक आभारी आहोत.
धन्यवाद. या कठीण प्रसंगामध्ये आम्हाला एकत्र आणण्यासाठी झूम मीटिंग, तसेच जगाला एकत्र व जवळ आणण्यासाठी झूम वेबिनार आणि मार्गची डिजिटल संकल्पना साकारण्यासाठी टाटा ट्रस्ट, या सगळ्यांचे आम्ही मनपूर्वक आभार मानतो.
खूप खूप आभार to all the artists, galleries, museums, designers for being part of this wonderful journey.
Thank you to our consultants and our collaborators for being a part of this journey.
This opportunity to thank the lawyers, financial consultants,
auditors, and the council for being with Marg.
I would like to thank Tata Sons for providing us the beautiful place in the Army and Navy building. Also, I would like to thank all the Tata companies who place order for desk diaries that we produce.
Thank you to all former colleagues, including those who were there before us, for leading the way.
Thank you very much. India Post and Couriers Company, Margina Books Magazine and ಮನೆ ಮನೆಗೂ ಹಾಗೂ ಆಫೀಸಿಗೆ ತಲುಪಿಸಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಮಾರ್ಗಿನ ಪರವಾಗಿ ನಾನು ಕೃತಜ್ಞತೆಯನ್ನು ಸಲ್ಲಿಸುತ್ತೇನೆ ಹಾಗೂ नमगे ಮುಂದೆ ಕೂಡ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಆಯರ್ಥ ಇದೆ ಎಂದು ನಾನು ನಂಬಿಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೇನೆ.
आपल्या मार्ग परिवाराला ऑल द बेस्ट. तसेच आपले आर्मी नेव्ही विलंबरशील सिक्युरिटी गार्ड्स आणि त्यांचे सहकारी यांचे आभार. तसेच सगळ्यांनी स्वतःची काळजी घ्यावी हीच नम्र विनंती. धन्यवाद.
ಮಾತೆರೆಗಳ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ನಿಗಲು ಮಾರ್ಗಕ್ಕೆ ಸಹಾಯ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಡನೆ ವಿನಂತಿ.
Thank you, the Marg Foundation, for your supports and the appreciation. I feel honored as I get into the associate with your creative team. Thank you, been an inspiring team. I also appreciate all your contribution to the development of our foundation and the success. And I hope you continue support our foundation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you to our past editors and associate editors, as well as members of our editorial advisory board. Amader ei poth cholatei anondo.
I want to thank our contributors. Thank you for bringing the best of scholarship and new insights to Marg.
मार्ग की एक नए सदस्य होने के नाते मैं अपने सारे कॉलीग्स को धन्यवाद देना चाहूँगी उनकी मदद और सहयोग के लिए.
I would like to thank all my colleagues and the Marg team for your patience.
On behalf of the entire Marg team, I thank Radhika Sabawala, former general manager of Marg, without whose perseverance for more than 3 decades, we could not have rediscovered our Marg today. We thank our trustees, especially the managing committee members whose faith in us has been our greatest support. I thank our partners and consultants who have worked with us, and most importantly, I thank the incredible Marg team. This new Marg is their sweat and hope. ഈ മാർഗ് അവരുടേതാണ്, എന്നാൽ ഇത് നിങ്ങളുടെ ഓരോരുത്തരുടെയുമാണ്. We are in this together. Thank you and salam. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Good night. Thank you. Thank you.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night, all.
Bye.
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 Terrific.